And welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to another weekend edition of the PondCast episode 65. Your weekly dose of all things StarCraft. I'm Coach VIP. With me and joined by Kuro handling the production, and of course the lovely people in the chat as well. We have a lot to catch up on, as always, as a tradition. After last week's PondCast, bam, all the news dropped. So once again, we had a bunch of news dropping, a bunch of things that occur right after we did wrap up our own podcast. So unfortunately, we weren't able to really talk too much on it. I say that, I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but I mean, there's a lot to get into when it comes to the patch itself, which did go live yesterday alongside the Team Liquid Map Contest 21 Finalists and many, many more events that occurred in and throughout StarCraft. Let's go. There's a lot to get into. First thing is first, as you heard from me, the patch is now live, is now part of the base game. Did go live 24 hours ago, or technically a little bit under 24 hours ago. No, yeah, 24 hours ago. Did go live. We did host and organize 2 events on the live patch already. We had Lily Cup yesterday and we had Picasso Cup yesterday as well. So 2 events. 2 events have already occurred on the live version of the game with the new patch, but there is a bit of a caveat to that. Something that caught a lot of people off guard was, one, that the patch did go live as quickly as it did, and also that the patch is different to the PTR version of the patch as well. So definitely very controversial is what I will say, and I'm not too fond of the idea. Basically, the PTR was live for less than 2 weeks. It was less than 2 weeks that the PTR was live. It was like, I want to say 8 days that we had the previous iteration of the PTR, and then bam, they pushed it live. And that in of itself isn't the biggest issue. It's that they pushed it live with a new version of the game that wasn't tested. So it was kind of crazy. I was very shocked, very surprised that they basically made a bunch of changes, made a bunch of adjustments, pushed it live. No testing has been done. As a result, there are a bunch of bugs. True, there are a bunch of bugs in the game, unfortunately. And also there are some changes that are a little bit questionable that I feel like did require some testing ahead of time. Not necessarily saying that that they are maybe too far or not too far enough in certain aspects, but the fact that we don't know is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. So, yeah, I was a little bit caught off guard. If you remember, I said with confidence that, oh, you know, the patch is probably going to go live next month with the Team Liquid Map Contest maps. So it makes sense to go live with the map pool. It'll make sense to have the PTR for a month at least, but we had it for less than 2 weeks. So less than 2 weeks of a PTR, and then bam, they pushed it live. Now, very quickly, before we get into the changes themselves, I will say that I am going to be less concerned for this if we do get some adjustments or some balance updates soon. So one of the concerns, of course, is the bugs that are now in the game. The bugs most likely will be rectified, but if some of these changes are too far or not far enough in certain ways, in certain aspects, then I'm hoping that we do get like an amendment patch soon, TM. I want to believe, especially with the attention that StarCraft II has been getting as of late, I want to believe that they're not going to just push it live and then just abandon the game and just leave it to its own devices and not really be too concerned with how things do evolve and how things transpire and changes that need to be made. I'm not saying that I expect the game to be patched, you know, multiple times a year. Not at all. I think we can hope for like a yearly patch, to be honest. I think that's the most we can hope for, really. But at the same time, I would also hope that, hey, once they push it live, I would hope that they are attentive enough to actually look after it and make sure that everything's working as intended for the most part, and that nothing's broken and nothing's, you know, too out of the norm when it comes to the patch itself. So I want to believe that that's going to happen. I want to believe that we're going to get some amendment patches moving forward, at least in the near future, but only time will tell. Only time will tell on how much attention StarCraft is going to get after this patch is now in the hands of the people, is now pushed through. So yeah, it's kind of it caught a lot of us off guard. I woke up yesterday morning and I woke up to some messages. I was like, oh, it's live. Oh my god, like what's happening? I was very quickly going through all the notes and figuring out what was going on. So very quickly, let us step into the patch itself. I guess we can also do a little bit of a comparison to the previous patch as well, so we can kind of point out what is different, what has changed, and what has not changed either. So up first, we have Zerg. We have the Zerg changes. With the Spire cost, this has been consistent throughout the entirety of the PTR. So the Spire is now going to be reduced by 50 minerals and by 50 gas. So the Spire is now cheaper. This is in the effort to try to make Mutaplay more viable in all the matchups, specifically in ZVT, but of course it's going to be applicable to every matchup with Zerg involved in ZVP and ZVZ as well. Again, this is just because Mutaplay has fallen out of favor and fallen out of the meta for many years at this point. It's been a long time since Lingbane Muta has been the meta in ZVT. That was kind of in the glory days of StarCraft, and it's a style that a lot of people do miss. It's a really exciting style. It's a really active style. Everyone loves it. But again, it hasn't been around for a very long time. So it's really cool to see them looking to push for this kind of change. The other change, of course, is the Spire build time. This was added in the previous iteration of the PTR. This was an update, and this did stick around until the live version, and that is the build time was also reduced from 71 to 66 seconds. So the Spire is cheaper and the Spire builds faster as well. This is going to be impactful when it comes to scouting. This means that you do have slightly less time to scout, to confirm, and to recognize what exactly is going on. This will be most impactful, I feel like, for ZVZ and ZVP, where something like that can be a little bit more impactful if not scouted. ZVT as well, I guess, but it's going to be a little bit easier to get eyes on this just because of the way that Terran players do harass. Same with Protoss as well, but again, we'll see. We'll see how players are able to adapt. Again, the patch has been live for just over a day at this point, so we actually have not really seen too much Mutaplay, at least in the games that we've seen, but there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that later on once we get into the tournaments that have been played out. So we'll get to that. The next big change here for Zerg is going to be Centrifugal Hooks, and now does give 5 bonus HP. This is a change that players have been asking for a very long time, basically ever since it was removed. When it was, so I should say, this is a reversion of a change. Basically, Centrifugal Hooks used to, for a very long time, give 5 HP, right? It used to give that to Banelings, but if you remember, it was 2 years ago, it was a couple of years ago now, where there was an update which did actually nerf the Baneling. It nerfed the Baneling in a couple of ways. One, it got rid of the HP bonus. Two, it actually reduced the damage that it dealt. If you remember, +2 used to be a big timing in ZVP, and it used to be a little bit too much, where +2 would kick in, and what +2 would mean is that Banelings would one-shot probes. They would one-shot workers, so then you'd hit with +2, you'd rush into +2 very quickly, you'd have mass Lingbane harass, and Protoss players are having a very hard time reacting in time, pulling away, minimizing losses, especially because of how unforgiving that +2 timing was. So because of that, damage was reduced, but it was twofold. Damage was reduced and HP was reduced as well to the Baneling. So it was 2 nerfs at once. And ever since then, people would argue that that was too much, especially because it did also impact Banelings in other matchups in ZVT. Because of this Baneling nerf, it did lead into the meta that we currently have and that we had for a very long time, which is Roach Ravager instead of Lingbane. So Roach Ravager openers became the normal because Lingbane became less viable. Because the Baneling had less HP, it meant it was much easier to kill Banelings before they engaged and before they collapsed into a biocomposition and versus Protoss as well. So Banelings became less viable and Roach Ravager rose in prominence, and that is why for the past 2 years, maybe more than that, in ZVT, Roach Ravager as openers has been the norm, and you just skip Lingbane entirely in the early game. Sometimes you get into Lingbane in the mid game and in the mid to late game. That is true, but Lingbane openers did fall by the wayside. Not just that, if you remember, this also coincided with the Queen nerf as well, where Queens also, they also took a big blow where they became more expensive, they became weaker as well, so that did minimize Queen defense, and it did further push Roach play. Like, Queens were weaker, Lingbane was weaker, so Roach play did stand out for Zerg players in ZVT, and I would say that was a negative thing. This also goes in line with certain things that people have been saying. Numbers don't mean everything, and they can often kind of like obscure problems that are in the game. So what I'm getting at here, if you remember, infamously, I'm going to point him out, but many people are saying this for Hero Marine. If you ever see someone say this, then just, have some alarms like flaring in your mind. When people say like, oh, but like win rates in X matchup were good, why are they changing this? I think Gabe infamously said this a lot, right? When he was like critiquing why people were pushing for certain changes in the game. He was like, oh, but like the ZVT win rates are good. Well, that might be the case where it's relatively balanced. But if you're looking at the games themselves aren't really giving out what people want. As I mentioned, like, sure, ZVT did balance out over time, but it did kill Mutaplay, did kill Ling Bane play, did promote slower defensive Roach Ravager play instead, and it led into, I would say, a worse game state and a less interactive, less entertaining, and less exciting kind of matchup. So on the one hand, yes, like, numbers were balancing out, but if you're looking at the games themselves, like, it wasn't the kind of game state that we were wanting. It's same with other matchups as well, where if certain win rates are evening out, that doesn't really tell you everything. It doesn't tell you anything really. Like, it tells you, sure, win rates are good, but what's happening in the games themselves is what's happening in the games, what we want out of StarCraft, and is it healthy for the game as well. So you're only kind of given, it's only like one kind of data point that you can use to formulate an opinion, but there's so much more that you need to take to be able to with confidence kind of say, like, whether or not a game state or a matchup is currently healthy or is not so healthy. You can say something similar with TVP, where TVP win rates more or less were evening out, but if you're looking at a lot of the games, what was happening in them, a lot of Terran all-ins, right? A lot of TVP was just pure Terran all-ins time and time again. Ending the game on 2 bases, ending the game pre 3 and 4 base setup, right? So it's like, oh, like, look at the win rates, but if you look at the games themselves, what's happening? Well, you're getting a lot of all-ins because a lot of players, and same with ZVP actually, in the current game state, games will be ending very, very quickly because Zerg and Terran do not want to get into the mid to late game against Protoss, because then they'd heavily fall off. So even if win rates are looking even, it's because games are ending faster, because they need to end faster, because of other portions of the game are kind of less balanced or favoring one race a little bit too much. So, like, there's a lot more to kind of take into consideration there and to factor in. So yeah, just, you know, if you ever see someone saying that, just be careful, like, because it's not the full story that they're kind of pointing at, and they can even be a little bit facetious when trying to say that as well, when kind of pushing for leaving things a certain way. So be careful, Pat, be careful. Meanwhile, so we do have a buff here to the Baneling. Again, they're still not improving the Baneling to the point where it can one-shot probes again. So that is still, of course, you know, not being touched. But now the Baneling has more HP. Now Banelings actually survive longer, engaging into bioarmies, engaging in ZVT, likewise in ZVP as well. We actually saw that during the course of some of the games we were casting tonight in the last 24 hours, is that now Banelings are able to survive, whereas they would otherwise die from storms, right? Like, that extra tick damage, that extra 5 HP has actually been impacting ZVP, allowing for Banelings to actually get through storms or get away from storms as well, thanks to that extra health. So it's a pretty big change. It does make Ling Bane play more viable. That could be a good thing or a bad thing in certain aspects. Again, it's something that has to be monitored, of course, but it does mean that now we're going to see more Ling Bane against Terran. At the same time, we have been seeing a lot more Ling Bane against Protoss now as well. Previously, in the meta of ZVP, you'd go Ling Hydra or you'd go Roach Hydra. Sometimes you'd dabble in Banelings as well, but very often you would skip Banelings. It was very common for players to skip Banelings. It would typically be a safety measure to get Banelings early on instead. That is why Glaive Adept timings and charge timings would be really deadly if the opposing player skipped Banelings and skipped Roaches, which would happen quite often, to be honest, in ZVP. It happened quite often and allowed Protoss players to have this timing, to have this window where they can punish a player for being too greedy. Now, with Banelings being more viable, we have noticed an uptick of players no longer skipping Banelings and embracing Banelings instead and going into Ling Bane. This does take away from certain timing attacks that Protoss players would otherwise have, because now players are being a little bit less greedy. At the same time, because we're getting an uptick of Banelings, now we are seeing more engagements earlier on as well, which I'm not too opposed to. But again, it's still only been 24 hours, so we still have to see more. But again, this is going to increase the amount of Ling Bane you're going to be seeing in all matchups. Mainly in ZVT and ZVP. It's not really going to impact ZVC too much, which I would say is a positive thing, but that is a change that we're already seeing. Meanwhile, we do have Microbial Shroud. That was the other big, massive change, a change that I have yet to actually see in the game itself. But Microbial Shroud is now an upgrade. This was also messed around a little bit. Initially, it was not an upgrade, but now it is, right? So now there's an upgrade on the Infestation Pit for Microbial Shroud, and now it does reduce range attacks by 50%. That is huge. Microbial Shroud is something that has been messed around with quite a lot over time, especially with its introduction. If you remember, it's a relatively new spell that was introduced after they removed the Infested Terran. So they got rid of Infested Terran, and they tried to compensate in some way with Microbial Shroud, and it was just poorly implemented. It was only in the most recent patch before this, where if you remember, there was a buff to Microbial Shroud. It was like, what, 4 years too late, but but it did get buffed. And the buff was that now Microbial Shroud attaches to units after they move out of it. So then basically, in an instance where you're up against Skytoss with Storm, if Storms are going to be landing, Hydras can move out of the Microbial Shroud, and the Microbial Shroud, it latches onto the Hydra, so it's still gaining benefits for a little bit of time, so it's not being nullified completely. That was a change that was implemented again, like last year or the beginning of the year, but it still didn't really improve its play. Like, it was better 100%, but it still wasn't really viable, and now it's being adjusted again, and this is a pretty huge change. This now changes Microbial Shroud from a niche, if not never used ability, into something that's honestly going to be quite impactful in ZVT. And I would say potentially ZVZ as well. This is going to have less of an impact against Protoss. The reasoning for this is because Storm doesn't care about ranged attacks. Same with Disruptors as well. There are other spells and abilities that can kind of bypass this and are still quite strong against this. So I would say this is going to impact Zerg versus Protoss the least. I think that Protoss players are going to they're still going to have a relatively easy time turtling up and defending, but this is going to impact ZVT and potentially ZVZ as well. Now, when it comes to Zerg versus Terran, if you know anything about the meta right now, you would know that right now it is very, very popular, very meta, very standard to do what? To rush into Hive Tech and rush into Ultras. Ever since DreamHack Dallas, Shin, he was able to beat Clem with this style initially, going for Roach-based openers, gasless start into Roaches, into Safety Infestors, into Hive, into Ultra Tech. This is something that Shin did initially start the kind of like popularization, the wave of. It was a build that existed before that, but again, Shin kind of popularized it, then everyone latched onto it, and we've been seeing a lot of that in recent months, ever since DreamHack Dallas, so it's been quite a number of months at this point. Not just that, but in more recent times, in more recent weeks, in more recent months, we had Raynor taking it to the next level. What was Raynor doing? Instead of going into Roach-based openers, into Roaches, into Infestors, into Ultras, Raynor has been skipping Roaches, skipping Banelings, and going Ling, Infestor, Ultra. Very greedy, very risky, and he's had some mixed results with it. If you're watching Masters of the Game last weekend, then you would have seen Cyril doing the same thing. Cyril, he was playing the same builds that Raynor was, and if you remember, we were casting at the time, I was very surprised. I was like, oh, Cyril's starting to do this as well, going straight Ling Infestor into Ultra. Like and he did it quite often in that series against Clem. So in my mind, it was something that only Raynor was messing with, but it looks like Cyril, I mean, they're good friends, they're on the same team, looks like Cyril has started to adopt that style as well. But I was mentioning something there. The Infestor is a big part of that style, both the Shin version and the Cyril Raynor version, right? It's a big part of that to keep you safe, to keep you alive, to get into Hive Tech, to get into Ultras. And now the Infestor, which is a key part of this style that is very meta currently, is going to be buffed in a way where now you have Microbial Shroud as an option. Now, Microbial Shroud is still an upgrade. It's still an upgrade, so it is going to hit in a longer and later game, but I will say that this is going to be a really good transition when it comes to supporting your Ultras. So when you're going Ling Ultra, you're going to be surviving and getting to that point with Fungals mainly, like Fungals to lock down the Bio Army, but then once you get into max out compositions, once you hit your stride, then you can upgrade Microbial Shroud, and then you can support the Ling Ultra even further. So I do think that that's going to be a really, really big power spike, or it's going to be a nice way to transition into a longer game. I do think that this is still something that you upgrade a little bit later, but it is going to be impacting that matchup and that style specifically, because you're already getting Infestors, right? You're already getting Infestors with this style, and now they're going to have like another kind of another tier above where they can be even more useful than they already were. This also will allow it to be less all-in. If you know anything about this style, you would know that you're rushing into Ultras really quickly, really, really quickly with with both versions, because you're cutting a lot of corners, you're cutting a lot of tech. Again, when you're going Ling and Fester Ultra, you're skipping out on banelings, you're preserving a lot of gas as well, because you're not wasting gas on like Hydras or Spire or anything like that, or on banelings either. So you're rushing to Ultras really quickly. Gas is really tight, and if you don't kill your opponents, if you don't deal critical damage, then your opponent will outscale you eventually. It does typically hit before Ghost, right? The Ultras, they do hit before Ghost tech really comes into form. And if the opposing Terran player can slow down, can stabilize, then they can work towards Ghosts and Liberators and outscale the Zerg player. But now there's going to be, with Microbial Shroud, now there's going to be a way for the Zerg player to keep up and to keep the aggression going and to keep up that momentum. It's not going to be as much of a hard cutoff as it was previously. So this is going to impact that matchup quite a bit. What I will say, unfortunately, as I mentioned at the beginning, is that Microbial Shroud is something that we haven't seen yet. It's only been a day, the live patch, but we haven't seen any ZVTs. We'll get into it with the tournament results. We have not seen any Zerg versus Terrans. In general, Zerg representation is, as you know, very, very low. So this is something that we have not been able to witness yet. But I'm sure we will in the coming days, in the coming weeks, and then we can see how impactful it is, how strong it is when it comes to breaking certain defensive positions in ZVT. Because that's what it's going to be designed for, right? It's going to be designed for laying down these Microbial Shrouds, allowing for your Ling Bane, your melee-based army, your Ling Bane Ultra to break through these siege lines, ideally to get up these ramps, to push into these locations, and to engage into bases, into these entrenched positions. That's going to be the goal, of course, but again, we need to see how powerful or how not powerful it is. There's other counter factors that are going to be applicable here, of course, once we talk about the Ghost. That'll be in the Terran changes, but from at least the Zerg side, this is going to be applicable there. As I mentioned before, it's going to be less applicable against Protoss, because Storm and Purification Overs don't really care about this. Mainly Storm, we'll get into that soon, but Storm is a big part, and we have seen a lot of ZVPs already, and I will say at least currently, Protoss players are having an easier time defending and turtling up. We'll get there. Get to those changes. But scrolling down, we do have the Protoss changes here. We do have NG Overcharge. Now, this is something that everyone has been asking for a very long time. So there was no surprise here, but NG Overcharge has been nerfed from 100 energy down to 50. So now it is half as effective. This already is a huge change. I have already seen some people with their own agenda, of course, where they're pushing their own thing, kind of bring this up and be like, oh, it doesn't really matter, like the Storm is too good, all this stuff. I feel like this is being overlooked. This is a pretty huge change. This impacts everything. This impacts the amount of storms that Protoss has. This impacts the amount of scouting that Protoss has with the hallucinations, and it also does impact the defensive ability of the shield battery as well. Like NG Overcharge, it just permeates throughout so many different aspects of Protoss. So reducing it by half is pretty big, and it does impact every matchup as a result. So already this is a huge change, and again, it's a change that everyone was asking for. So this is something that I think everyone's probably fine with. It is going to be reduced. Does impact, as I mentioned, things like Storm, things like scouting, hallucinations, shield battery, kind of how effective they are, of course. Also, Oracles, true, PvP. Oracles have been very oppressive. If you know anything about PvP in the current meta, you know that Oracles with the stasis fields, not even just stasis traps, fields of stasis traps, has been very oppressive. But that's also going to be addressed here in this patch, not just with this NG change with the recharge, but also with the stasis ward as well. We'll get there. Likewise, the NG recharge cooldown was reduced from 1 minute to 45 seconds. So now you can do it a little bit more regularly. True, if you have the NG for it. The other change that we had is the mothership. The mothership movement has been reduced from 2.83 to 2.25. Now, this change is because, if you remember, it wasn't too long ago, but the mothership became unabductable. Right, the mothership was a meme for a very, very long time. Minus 400, because it would be the first thing to be abducted in a late game skirmish in ZVP, but then they got rid of the abduction. Ever since they got rid of it, to be honest, motherships are no longer dying. They're no longer dying. They do maintain effectiveness and value over the course of the entire late game. If the Protoss player is good enough, which they are at this level of play, of course, they are retaining, they're preserving, and they're retaining that mothership throughout the course of the entirety of the late game. If they ever do lose it, it's typically because they're going for like a mass recall move. If they try to sneak across the map or go elsewhere and try to go for a mass recall. There are instances where it does go down, but it is few and far between. Because of that, they're now making it somewhat more vulnerable here by making it slower. This will make it more difficult to retreat, but also to engage as well. So I do really like this. It is a nice kind of counterbalance to the fact that it can no longer be abducted, to the point where it has been a very, very strong tool in late game Protoss matchups and late game Protoss compositions. So this is a way to hinder that in some way. Heading on over, we have a Psystorm. Psystorm, big changes, of course. Now, no longer is it as bursty. No longer does it do as much impactful damage immediately over time. Now it is going to be stretched out instead. So Psystorms, they last a pretty long time, actually. Jesus. So change from 80 damage over 3 seconds to 140 damage over 6 seconds. 6 seconds doesn't sound like a long time, but because StarCraft is so high-paced, you can see it. You can feel it. It lasts a very, very long time. It is a very powerful zoning tool now. Now, there's a bit of a give and take here. Now, when it comes to the radius of the storm, it was actually reduced from the PTR version. In the PTR, it was, let me just double check here. It was a radius of 2.25. In the live version, it was reduced to 2, right? So the radius was reduced to 2 instead. So this is smaller than was on the PTR. Likewise, another change here to the live version of the game that wasn't a part of the PTR is the cast range. Psystorm range reduced from 9 to 8. This is pretty big as well. So I do like that the Blizzard team, or whoever's at Blizzard, they did listen to feedback. So now the radius is smaller for Storm, and now the High Templar is more vulnerable and more exposed when casting Storm as well. Now the Templar has to push further forward, which means it's more vulnerable to snipes, it's more vulnerable to EMPs, it's just more vulnerable in general here when going for these Storms. So it is a nice counterbalance to that. But again, despite that, it is still a very now strong zoning tool. Now we have been casting a lot of TVP over the past day. I mean, just because, again, there's a lot of Protoss and a lot of Terran when it comes to online tournaments, so we've been seeing a lot of this. We've been casting a lot of Clan versus Maxwax, Clan versus Hero, Clan versus Classic, Cure, Beyond into the intermix as well. So we've been seeing a lot of TVP, and it's been changing quite a bit. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll go through all the Protoss changes first. So we have the Storm change. It's pretty big. It leads to a lot of things, of course. I guess, you know what, we'll just talk about it. So when it comes to Storm now, my big concern here with how powerful of a zoning tool it is, this does impact ZVP quite a bit. So in Zerg versus Protoss, the Protoss end goal was already to be very defensive and very turtley. That was already the case, right? It's like it was already after the mid game. If the Protoss player is being aggressive, after the aggression dies down, you back off, you turtle up on 4 bases, and you max out and you get into Skytoss. This is why, if you've been watching ZVP over the past year, basically over the past year of play, over the past 10 months, Zerg players have been all in. Every game, every single game here. If you watch Solar, if you watch Shin, if you watch Raynor, if you watch any of the Zerg players, they all go for all-ins, except for Serral. Serral is a bit of a different story. Serral, he is hyper-aggressive, but typically what Serral, he does all-in as well. True, Serral, he does all-in, but very often what does Serral do? He instead does crippling damage. He is aggressive, does crippling damage, and then he takes a lead. He takes a lead, and then he goes into the late game. That's typically how Serral approaches it. But from everyone else, Rogue, Solar, Shin, Raynor, Lambo, all the other Zerg players, they're all hyper-aggressive, and typically, like, 80 to 90% of games, they all in. They all in Zerg versus Protoss. They either kill the Protoss player or they die trying. And there are certain maps where all-ins are more favored, so we kind of read that ahead of time. Maps like Pylon, maps like Ultralove, maps like Torches as well. There are other maps where it's harder to all-in, but they try anyway. Or you can go into Mutaplay. But what I'm getting at here is that now with the change of Storm, this does actually make it easier for Protoss players to turtle. Now, because Storm lasts so long, yes, it does less initial damage, but because now it's a really strong zoning tool, it lasts 6 seconds, every second counts, it is easier now to defend on 3 and 4 bases, to defend, to stabilize, and to be able to get into Skytoss. It is now more difficult as the aggressing player to push into all these Storms because they last so long. So this is something that we have noticed throughout the PTR and now over the past 24 hours with the new patch. But at the same time, things may change a little bit. What I will say is that in general, Protoss players are going to be stronger defensively, turtling up. But at the same time, as we mentioned before, Muta play is a little bit more viable, so we could see an uptick in players attempting to go Muta, especially because now it's a little bit more difficult to scout for the Protoss player. So we're probably going to be seeing an upswing in Muta play, and we might see Protoss players adjust as well. We might even see a rise in like Showtime's build where he opens Phoenix. Like Showtime, he goes Phoenix, Oracle, Oracle. The reasoning for this is because one, he's able to deny vision, but also he's able to have a bit of an easier time scouting, and he's already working towards a bit of an anti-air in case there is Muta play, for example, because you will preserve that Phoenix over the course of the game, and then you can go into more Phoenixes afterwards. So we'll see if Spire play rises in popularity to try to have another answer here to Protoss. That is going to be an option. True. That is going to be an option. Otherwise, we'll see if we get some new Lingbane all-ins, right? Traditionally, over the past year, we see a lot of Ling Hydra-based all-ins, a lot of Roach Ravager-based all-ins, a lot of German Taxis and Nidus-based all-ins, Drop Lord-based play. The Zerg players have been getting creative. They've been getting very creative over the past year when it comes to different all-ins against Protoss. And now that the Baneling is more viable, we're probably going to be seeing more of that as well. And that might be enough. That might still be enough. You might be able to find the timing before Storm hits as well. But I feel like for the most part, ZVP is still stuck in the same place where Zerg players want to all in and Protoss players want to turtle and defend. Unfortunately, I don't think this patch really changes ZVP too much. As far as it's all theoretical, of course. We'll see if maybe it does change. But from what I can see right now with these changes, and from what we can see over the past day and during the PTR, the overall goal for both the Zerg and the Protoss feels like it remains the same. At least currently. Hopefully that changes. But in the current state of things, like that is still the case. Scrolling down, Dark Templar blink delay reduced from 0.75 to 0.25. So now DTs, when they blink, they now hit faster than they previously did. The first swipe, I mean, the delay is reduced. So this does make DT harass in PvT more viable, much stronger, almost to what it was in the past. So this is now more of an option here for Protoss players in PvT. I kind of glossed over it. For PvT, this is an interesting change as well. I think overall it is a buff for Protoss, but it is not as maybe game defining on its own. But there's a lot that's coming into play here. So when it comes to Storm, at the highest level of play, Terran players are taking less damage because they're already pre-splitting and trying to avoid, as best they can, storms, right? Also EMPing as well. And now when Storm hits initially, it's doing less damage. It does more damage over time, of course, if you're standing in the storms. And Terran players at the highest level of play are typically avoiding that kind of game state. I will say that this change is going to be more meaningful and more brutal for lower tier players. So for, GM and below, of course, I will still factor in GM like 5K, 5.5K as well. Terran players, they're going to be punished so much more for standing in storms. It's going to be a lot more unforgiving to stand in storms as well, just because it will do more damage over the course of the entire storm. So you have to get the hell out of there. So that is going to be more brutal, 100%. Is going to be impacting lower leagues. But on top of that, because it's now a stronger zoning tool, it is now a little bit more difficult for Terran players to engage. I say difficult because there is counterplay now. With the Ghost having less supply, I'm getting ahead of myself, but it all kind of comes into play here. The Ghost does have reduced supply, so now there's more Ghosts, but at the same time, there's also a buff to the Colossus. I guess we'll go through all the changes and we can kind of... it all plays into each other. We'll get there. Another change here is Surveillance Mode. Surveillance Mode now reveals observers. That is basically the siege mode of the observer. If you remember, this is something that we spoke about during the PTR changes, about how it was kind of weird that Protoss were getting all these quality of life changes. True, it was really weird that they were getting all these quality of life changes, and some of the other races weren't. And I was of the opinion that either you give it to all the players, to all the races, or you take it away. And it looks like we're taking it away. Like a way of giving it would be to like, I don't know, give like the Raven an auto attack, or give the Infestor an auto attack, just like the High Templar has an auto attack. And give the Raven like a siege mode as well to increase the vision and detection range that it has, like the Observer does, like the Overseer does, right? Like standardize these kind of things, these aspects throughout the races. Instead, we've kind of taken it away from the Observer, where now it is revealed when it sieges up. This will make it more difficult to scout, which is a good thing. One of the big criticisms of TVP especially was that Protoss players were having a very easy time scouting with all the hallucinations and with the Observer as well. So this will make it more difficult. I say more difficult. We still do see Protoss players using it and then sieging and then unsieging and then moving around, but now there's more like counterplay available, and of course it is less F2 friendly as well, which I think is a positive thing. Balance-wise, I should say. Obviously, this is going to be hurting lower league players because now there's a little bit less quality of life available here for the race, but they have it in other ways anyway, so I'm not too opposed to it. Surveillance mode vision increased from 13.75 to 15, so that's to compensate. And again, if you've been watching pro play over the past 24 hours, you'll know that Protoss players are still sieging their Observers, but instead what they would do is they would dip in, siege it, get that extra vision, see the main, unsiege, back off, rotate, move the Observer. So there's more activity, there's more micro, there's more APM, and more attention to detail with the Observer, which is really cool, which I do appreciate, and we're seeing that already. The other change here is Purification Nova. Purification Nova's cooldown reduced from 21.4 to 17 seconds, so now you can send out Novas that much more regularly, that much faster. This is going to impact the mid to late game of PvT, because in PvT, you typically start with either Colossus or Storm, and then you get the other that you did not start with to compensate to round out your army. And then as the game progresses, as the Terran player gets more Vikings, as they get more Ghosts, as Colossus and as High Templar become less effective, you transition out of them into Disruptors. So this is going to make the Disruptor itself a little bit more potent, more powerful, as you can now send Novas out faster. And then we have the Stasis Ward reduction, duration reduction from 170 seconds to 90 seconds. This is mainly going to impact PvP. We spoke about it earlier, we touched on it, but in PvP, Oracle-based openers and stasis wards and stasis traps were a huge part of it, and were very oppressive to the point where it was abusive, to be honest. It was crazy just how effective Oracles and stasis traps were in PvP, and this feels like a targeted PvP nerf, or Oracle nerf in PvP to take away from that, which I don't think is a bad thing. Now, basically, you can still throw down as many stasis wards, but now you can't set them and forget them ahead of time. Now it is more on the player to scout a push coming and then set it up in time for the push, instead of setting it up like a minute, 2 minutes ahead of time instead. Right, from 170 to 90 seconds, that's a big reduction. And again, now it is more unforgiving. Now you have to be more attentive with how and when you throw down those stasis traps, right? You cannot waste them. You cannot just set them well ahead of time just to throw them down. Now you have to be more intentional with that play, which I think is a good thing. It's basically just raising the skill floor on stasis wards, essentially, which again, I would say is a positive change. Scrolling down, we have the Terran changes. We have Siege Tank can no longer be abducted when in Siege mode. That is a pretty huge change, and that is going to be impacting late game TVZ specifically, so we'll get into that, of course. The Viking cost reduced from 150.75 to 125.75 as well, so slightly less minerals going to be costing for the Vikings. That will also be impacting TVP a little bit. I don't think it's the biggest impact. I don't think it's the biggest buff. It's kind of a weird change. I don't think the Viking transitions were much of an issue, but I guess now it's a little bit cheaper, a little bit easier, a little bit. Then we have the change to the Drilling Clause. Drilling Clause is, of course, the upgrade of the Widowmine. So the Widowmine itself is left untouched. It's just the Drilling Claw upgrade now means that the Widowmine does burrow slightly faster. So from 1.07 to 0.71 seconds. So now they're going to be drilling and burrowing that much faster. High-Flight Rotors, resource time decreased from 100 to 79. If you recall, I did say this was a really weird change. If you've been watching high-level PvT over the past month, maybe 2 months, basically post-EWC, you would know that top Terran players are already doing this. Top Terran players, they were already going into Hyperlight Rotors and not going into Cloak. The reasoning for this, if you've been watching the meta of TVP change over time, you'll know that Protoss players have stopped being greedy. Because of the rise in popularity of all-ins from Terran, Protoss players started playing very safe. They now open up 3 gates into 4, very often into a robo on 2 bases. Very often they take all 4 gases, they get the detection, they work towards Storm, and then they expand. Basically, Protoss players in current StarCraft compared to the start of the year are expanding later. They're taking later expansions, they're being safer instead, and because of that, if you do prioritize and if you do invest into Cloak Banshee, chances are, like 80-90% of the time, your opponent's going to have detection. They will have detection. Like, Cloak is not really as important, is not really as impactful. That is why Terran players have started going into High-Flight Rotors instead, which allows the Banshee to have micro potential. It does allow them to have micro potential to harass, to poke in, kill a couple of probes, pull away, go back in, pull back out, back and forth over the course of the game to just gain value over time. Players like Björn, Clem, and Maru, they have been enjoying this. We also, of course, saw this a lot when it came to BattleMech as well, but BattleMech, with the Cyclone being fixed, is now going to die down quite a bit in popularity. BattleMech, I think, is going to be pretty dead for the time being, to be honest. Like, the Cyclone was a big core part of BattleMech and the strength of BattleMech. Without it, it's probably not going to be seen too much at all. We'll keep an eye on that, of course. So that's also why this change is kind of weird, because this is something that players are already doing, but I guess now it's like pushing them in that direction even further, which is just buffing High-Flight Rotors by making it take less time, making it more accessible. Liberator sight reduced from 10 to 9. I do like this. This is a change that basically means the Liberator needs vision to shoot as far as it can. Very similar to the tank. The tank is the same. The tank can shoot further than it can see. Liberator now does the same thing. It is going to impact Liberator range the most, though, because I believe there's now a big part of the circle, a big part of the liberation zone that is no longer effective unless they have vision. Like, vision is going to be a lot more important with Liberators moving forward. So that is something to bear in mind. And then we have the change to the Ghost. Big change as well. This was not a part of the PTR. The Ghost supply was reduced from 3 to 2, and the Ghost is now light. Nish, for those who remember Nish, the StarCraft II observer, actually made a meme. I was like, oh no, the Ghost is light now, and I think he photoshopped my face onto the Ghost. Like, god damn it, Nish, god damn it. But it's a solid meme. so Ghosts are now light, papi. They're now light, and which is pretty huge, which is pretty big. I think this is a change, I would say, that has been pushed for a very long time. I feel like for many years, people have been asking and wanting the Ghost to now be changed to a light attribute. This is going to impact ZVT and TVP quite heavily, actually, and we already saw that over the past 24 hours. We'll get to it. Now that we have all the changes, how does this impact a lot of the matchups? We already kind of went into depth about ZVT and ZVP. For the most part, as I mentioned, ZVP is going to be unchanged when it comes to the overall goal of the two races, and I do feel like Protoss is going to be stronger in that role, with that goal of defending and turtling up. I do think that the Storm change is huge for Protoss, and they'll have an easier time defending and turtling against Zerg, as far as I can tell. Again, Microbial Shroud is less impactful in that matchup as well, just because of the Storm. Microbial Shroud doesn't work against that. And likewise, the one thing that I'm going to be looking for is the rise in popularity of Mutaplay and the rise in popularity of Baneling-based all-ins as well. So we'll see if they hit faster and if they can hit harder and try to break a Protoss early on. That's something that we'll be keeping our eye on in regards of ZVP. When it comes to the other matchups, very quickly, ZVT, we were talking about the change to Microbial Shroud and how that will be impacting Zerg versus Terran. That is true. We spoke about the composition, the current playstyle, the current meta of rushing into Ultras, and how this does fit very nicely, very seamlessly into supporting that kind of style. But now there are other changes on the other side, of course. One, the Siege Tank. The Siege Tank no longer being abducted. It does feel like that is to counterbalance the effectiveness of Microbial Shroud. This may actually... a couple of things. This is probably going to incentivize turtle play in TVZ as well. That is my big concern. Like, this is going to be a big buff for late game Terran and potentially mech in TVZ as well. I spoke earlier how battle mech is going to be less appealing, and it will be, but traditional mech can still be utilized, and we even saw that mixed in as well in the past. So we'll see if that does rise in popularity, but again, like, you do typically go into Ghost mech, or kind of like tank, Liberator, Ghost in late game TVZ. If you can get there, that's a big if. And again, the fact that tanks can no longer be abducted does mean that Zerg players have to commit that much harder to pushing into siege lines with Blinding Clouds, with Microbial Shrouds. They have to commit so much more harder here. What I will say is that with Microbial Shroud, the reason why I brought it up mainly with Ultras is because, yes, it is going to help support Ling Bane, but with siege lines and with defensive setups, Ling Bane is still going to have a harder time engaging. The Ultras, that is where, that is going to be the big kind of like breaking force to kind of break through these siege lines and break into bases. We'll see how these kind of dynamics apply. We'll see how powerful Microbial Shroud is going to be when it comes to breaking a defensive Terran player. When it comes to the Ghost, that's also a big change as well. The Ghost being light does mean that Ling Bane is going to be much more effective against Ghosts. One of the big issues with ZVT is just how cost-efficient Terran can be, because very often Ghosts would not die. They would survive engagements, they would survive these attacks because of how robust they were, because they were not light units. Now with that changing, this might have a really brutal side effect, which is it might actually make Terran players want to be less aggressive. So once a Zerg player gains map control in ZVT, when and if that happens, there's now more reason for Terran to just turtle up and to stay at home and to not be active and not push out, because now the Ghost is more vulnerable. Now the Ghost is less robust, so now there's less reason to start being active and pushing on the map. That is my big concern, is that now Terran players want to turtle because their army's less, it's less sturdy, right? So this is a really unfortunate side effect here. On the one hand, like, the goal was to make the Zerg army being able to engage and actually trade with Ghosts and actually have that back and forth. But I do feel like this is just going to push Terran players to just back off, turtle on up, and be less active instead. That is my concern, but we'll see. The maps are also going to be a big factor. The map pool, whether maps promote turtle play or whether they don't, will impact whether or not the Terran player wants to turtle as well, or if they want to be more aggressive earlier on. What I will say is about when in regards to this rush into Ultra style, is that players have been getting better and better at punishing it, at killing Zerg players early on with 8 Raxes, with earlier timings, with aggressive builds and aggressive styles. So instead, that might be promoted instead. So ZVT, I also want to emphasize that it's not like that's going to be the one playstyle that we're going to be seeing. We've also been seeing players like Clem, players like Bjorn, players like Cure shut down these attempted rush into Hive by killing the Zerg player early and punishing their greed. So it's going to be interesting to see how ZVT does change over the course of the next month. I do feel like it will adjust, it will change, especially because of the Muta as well. The Muta changed, so potential rise in Ling Bane Muta, potentially more aggressive Terran players out there, to make sure that the Zerg player isn't comfortably rushing into Hive. Like, there's definitely going to be some movement there. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to how that changes. When it comes to PvT, I was alluding to it before regarding how Colossus has been buffed, and it has been buffed in this matchup. Doesn't look like it, but with the Ghost now being light, Colossus, they actually trade really, really well against Ghost heavy compositions. And we saw Bjorn struggle yesterday morning. Basically, Bjorn, it looks like, players are adjusting, of course, they're adjusting as best they can. Bjorn, he went, I don't want to say he went on autopilot, but he kind of played how he usually does. And right now in the meta, because it's so common for Protoss players to be defensive, to delay their base, and to tech up into Storm quite quickly, because of that, we've seen players like Bjorn, players like Cure, players like Clem do what when getting into the mid game? Prioritize and rush Ghost production, where they get the Academy before they even land their third base. And you go into a really early Ghost heavy style. And we saw that out of Bjorn. Unfortunately, what we saw against that style was no Storm. No Storm at all, you rush into Colossus instead. And if the Terran player gets caught going into Ghost like that, and then Colossus show up instead of High Templar, then you're stuck with nothing. Sure, you can EMP, but because you spend all your money on Ghost, because you spend money on that kind of setup, you don't have Vikings, you don't have the counter to the Colossus, and Bjorn had a really hard time. But I will say that was attributed because he was stuck in the previous patch, right? you're stuck in this mindset of rushing to Ghost when that's not really what you need at the moment, potentially. Like, the meta of TvP is still shifting. It's still shifting. It's still settling. And we have seen the new Colossus dominate Ghost to the point where it looks like rushing to Ghost, like we saw a couple of days ago, is not going to be as viable if the Protoss player is going into Colossus, not Storm. True, that's a big if, of course. Like, I will say that opening Colossus and opening Storm both are still very viable. They both take you in different directions for Protoss and PvT, and they require different reactions as well. So we'll see how the meta settles in PvT. Scouting as well going to be paramount to know if you do need to rush into earlier ghosts or not, and what you need to prioritize. That's definitely going to be a big factor, of course, getting into that. But it also, as I mentioned, it does mean that now if you are going to be prioritizing and rushing ghosts, it does make you more vulnerable if the opposing player isn't going into Storm and is instead going into Colossus. Likewise, when it comes to Storm, it's a very powerful zoning tool. We have seen players struggle to adapt. We've seen a lot of Storms being thrown down. The Terran player moves out, and then they move back in too soon because it lasts so long. Like, the muscle memory has to be adjusted because, again, Terran players are so used to avoiding Storms, pulling back, and then pulling back in just at the right moment that it runs out to be able to engage and get the most amount of damage, of course, and to be able to get back into the fight. We have seen a lot of Terran players punished for doing that, and we've seen a lot of players run back into Storm head first and take a lot of damage. So that's something that has to be, again, it's going to be adjusted over time. Players are going to be getting used to it, of course. There's that learning process, that learning curve in TvP now. We have to readjust. Not just that, but Novas as well. I was saying this during the cast, but Purification Nova, because now they become active sooner, in your mind as a Terran player, it's not like you're counting down, not at all, but you have like a feeling. You have like a general feeling of when Novas are reset and when you have to like avoid pushing and avoid stimming forward. That now has to be kind of recalibrated a little bit because now Disruptors and Purification Novas are online faster than before. So you have to kind of like reorient yourself in that kind of game state as well. There's going to be a lot of that going on. In general, I will say that because Protoss scouting is going to be a lot worse because they have less hallucinations and because the observer requires a lot more attention as well, there is now more chances for Terran players to go for drop play, to be active across the map, to go across the map unscouted, and to be in the face of the Protoss. I will say that 100%. But as we mentioned, like, the mid game of TvP is going to be very, very different because of Storm, because of Colossus. Players are going to have to accommodate for that, and it's going to have to settle. In general, I do think that Protoss is going to be in a better state, to be honest. In general, this is a buff of PvT for Protoss and PvT, because not just because of Storm, not just because Storm is different. I will say Storm is different more than anything, but now because of the change of the Ghost, Colossus are a lot more viable as well as an option. A lot more viable. So switching back and forth from Storm into Colossus or opening Colossus instead of Storm, like, that's more viable as well. Like, I would say the Protoss players have a lot more options now, and it's looking, a lot more Protoss favored currently. It's hard to really say that with any certainty because it's only been 24 hours. There's still more time for the meta to settle, of course, but in general, I do feel like Protoss is coming out ahead here, in every matchup, actually. Because I was going to say specifically in PvT, but I would say the same about PvZ as well. Like, I would say that they are coming out stronger in PvZ just because, as I mentioned before, as we tried to explain, they will have a stronger defensive setup there as well. So, it's pretty crazy. it's pretty crazy. But Protoss, they are getting kind of buffed across, like, I won't say across the board. Like, obviously, as we mentioned, like, scouting is going to be weaker for Protoss. That's the big change. That's like the big quote unquote nerf for Protoss, is weaker scouting. So that is something that both Terran and Zerg have to take advantage of, is the fact that now scouting is more difficult for Protoss, and because of that, I can see, a rise in popularity of all-ins, of aggressive builds, aggressive styles, hidden tech. That's going to have to be the go-to, I feel, for a lot of Zerg and Terran players. That's the vibe that I'm getting currently when it comes to these changes. Oh boy. It's a crazy patch, and it is shaking up quite a bit in certain aspects, a little bit less so in others. When it comes to PvP, I also want to touch on that as well with the Protoss changes. PvP, the theory here from a lot of people, and I would go alongside them here, is that proxies are going to be stronger and one base all-ins are going to be stronger as well. The reason for this remember one of the changes are that is a little bit subtle that a lot of people overlook is NG overcharge. Because NG overcharge is weaker, that means that shield batteries are weaker, and that means that defensive early game and relying on shield batteries is weaker for Protoss as well. So proxies, proxy robo, proxy gateway, one base all-ins in PvP are going to be more difficult to defend. So that is going to be another byproduct of weakening the NG overcharge, and that might also factor in. Likewise, with the change to stasis ward, it does also impact PvP. We already spoke about that. That feels like a targeted PvP change where Stargate openers and heavily reliance on oracles in the early to mid game is going to be weaker as well. That is going to impact Max Pax. Max Pax is very fond of Stargate openers and oracle based play. He's very fond of it. He's the best at it, and we have seen him be very oppressive with it as well against players like Hero, against players like Classic. Against even lesser players as well, if he can get into those oracles and get into the mid game. So that is going to be a style that is going to be reduced. And in general, I do like the way that they're reducing it, just because, as we mentioned, you still have as many stasis wards, but you have to be more careful with how you use them. But again, the change to the NG overcharge, it may mean that we see more all-ins, more aggressive builds in PvP. When it comes to TVT, I don't think there's any real change there. When it comes to ZVZ, true, I should touch on that. When it comes to ZVZ, Mutaplay. Mutaplay is now more viable. I mean, we already see it mixed in, but now it's going to be finishing faster. So now you have to be on top of scouting. For ZVZ, you have to get on top of that Overseer Scout. Your lair timing is going to be more crucial to get across the map and to figure out whether your opponent is going for a Spire. Because, again, the Spire is cheaper, the Spire finishes faster, and Mutaplay can also be very oppressive if it goes unscattered in ZVZ. It happens at the highest level. We've seen several make use of it, Reina make use of it, Shin make use of it, Solo make use of it already. So now that's going to be an even stronger factor. It's going to be more unforgiving if you fail to scout. So that's another change that's going to be happening in regards to ZVZ. Again, TVT, I don't think it's going to change too much. I don't think there's anything here that changes TVT except for like the Viking change. In TVT, Sky Terran is the end goal, is air control. Air control, Mass Viking, Sky Terran, into BC, into Raven. That is the end goal of TVT. So I guess it's going to be a little bit easier to get into that, but it's a mirror matchup, so it's applicable to both players. It's like it's TVT for the most part should be unchanged. I guess just cheaper Vikings, so easier transition into Sky Terran, into that air control. But other than that, we've had a lot of bug fixes, which is a positive thing, of course. The bug fixes will be fixing the Cyclone, which will nerf Battle Mech. As we mentioned previously, Battle Mech is going to be a lot less viable moving forward. On top of that, a bug fix was changed to the Broodlord. Now, the Broodlord is going to be more effective. I don't know how much that's going to impact many of these matchups, though. I feel like it will mainly impact ZVP late game, if you ever see it. I'm looking to players like Serral, right? Serral's one of the only players that embraces late game PvZ. The other players, if they get there, it's like an accident. Like they get there because they failed to get damage done early on, and they're getting into the late game from behind. So we rarely get to see Broodlords from them. So from Serral, we might be seeing some late game PvZ. We might be seeing some Broodlords pop off. We'll have to wait for the next big premiere event for that, though. So, yeah, it's a pretty big change. It's a pretty big patch. In general, as I mentioned, Protoss are going to be they are very content. They're very happy. We've already seen that in the results. We've seen that from the players themselves. It's huge for them. When it comes to PvT, we'll see how it settles. It is going to be an interesting kind of dynamic between Terran and Protoss. Protoss are going to have more options coming into the mid game, and Terran, they're going to be a little more punished depending on how they open up. There's going to have to be a lot of adjustments made from Terran from their side of things. And again, when it comes to PvZ, I feel like the overall style is going to be the same, except potentially more all-ins, more attempted aggressive builds to try to kill Protoss early on. That might be the case for Terran as well. We already saw that over the course of the past 24 hours. So, and of course, I should also emphasize everything that I'm saying, a lot of it is purely theoretical or purely based on what we've seen so far in the PTR and in the last 24 hours. Of course, things can change. We're still very early in the life cycle of this patch, very, very early. So there could be things that we're overlooking. There could be things that we're not considering. And there could be builds that, of course, can rise up and rise in popularity and can impact the meta in their own way as well. So it's still a little bit early here. Overall, I do think it's a positive thing that we are getting a patch, 100%. It's a very bold patch as well, especially with Microbial Shroud, especially with the Storm change, especially with the Ghost change. Like these are the Siege Tank change as well. Like these are really bold changes. I think a lot of people moving forward, coming into this year, especially post EWC, there was a lot of doomerness. Like there was a lot of people smudging. There was a lot of people that were down on themselves. I know, like infamously, like Zombie Girl, like she was like checked out. She was like, yeah, I don't expect anything here. Like it's like StarCraft is done, sort of thing. Like a lot of people were like that. I was a lot more positive on that sort of thing. But I think a lot of people expected a patch like Harsam's proposed patch. And what I mean by that is like a couple of lines of like adjusted numbers, right? I think coming into this, I think people, when it came to the next patch of StarCraft, we expected like, a nerf to NG overcharge, like the plus 5 HP to Banelings, maybe the DT change, maybe like for Terran, it would have been like the drilling clause change, and like that's it, like adjusting numbers here and there. But to go one step further, to make the Ghost light, to make observers revealed, to change Microbial Shroud the way that they did, to change Storm the way that they did. These are big changes. Like these are pretty huge. Like regardless of the outcome, regardless of the balance of the game, like these are some big changes that I don't think anyone expected moving forward, which is really cool, which is really exciting, and it does bode well for the future of StarCraft. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, right? Like, I don't want to be like, oh, this means that, now we're going to get like an annual patch and every single time it's going to be like this and they're going to change everything. And we're getting all this attention again and we're getting all these bug fixes. Don't want to go that far. But in general, it's a positive thing, right? It's a positive sign to get all these bug fixes, to change certain units as drastically as they are. Like, it is all positive, regardless of how the game state falls, regardless of the balance of the game. Like, for all these changes that we push through is a good thing. And I think it's a positive thing, and I think it can give us a little bit more hope moving forward when it comes to Blizzard stepping into a developer role again, which is something that they stepped away from. This is, I will say that, this is, I guess, mainly speculation. I'm not like basing this off of anything, but in my mind, like, this is now finally, we all knew that it would take some time for Microsoft to start getting things rolling again. With Microsoft acquiring Blizzard, or Activision Blizzard, I should say, typically it takes like 1, 2, 3 years. Like they go through everyone, they go through all this like rehiring, firing, they go through all the departments, they go through all the games, they see like, okay, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? What can we change? What can we do? What can we do different? How can we like improve certain things? And it takes a long time to actually for them to go through the entire company and figure out what's going on and figure out like a plan and how to change things. But over the past year, like, there's been some positive changes, and I feel like we can all attribute that to Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard. I'm referring to Warcraft Reforged, right? Like, they had a big patch, was it this year? Beginning of this year? End of last year? But there was like a big patch for that where, again, like that was on, like, Warcraft Reforged was like on like hiatus. Like it was on the back burner, right? Like it was done. It was done. It was kind of like left on the shelf, and they came in. Big patch for that, big update, positive changes. Another one was Heroes of the Storm. Heroes of the Storm was also on ice, right? It was also abandoned publicly as well, where they were like, yeah, we're done patching the game, we're done fixing the game, or like giving any resources to Heroes of the Storm. And for Heroes, it was end of last year. It was like December of last year, where there was like a big balance change and a big patch and a big revitalization of Heroes. And everyone was surprised. Everyone was like, oh my God, like that's crazy. So Blizzard, they're paying attention to their games again. Happened to Heroes, happened to Warcraft Reforged, and now to StarCraft as well. So in my opinion, at least, again, based off of nothing, but just based on what's been happening, it feels like this is finally like Microsoft taking the reins, Microsoft being like, hey, we just acquired this company. Let's make some money. Let's actually look after these games and start working on the reputation of Blizzard again. Like, it's kind of crazy to think, but for a really long time, like, Blizzard had a really good reputation, right? Like, they were known for quality, they were known for their community, they were known for looking after their games and looking after their players. Like, BlizzCon was a big celebration of that for a really long time. And then, of course, over the years, that all fell by the wayside, right? Led to BlizzCon stopping. It led to them stepping away from all these games because they weren't making any money, of course. It led to them prioritizing profits and getting into loot boxes for Hearthstone, for Overwatch 2, infamously, right? Like, with what that was. It happened to WoW. Like, in a lot of ways, things did go downhill for Blizzard, for Activision Blizzard. And I want to say, like, especially with the changes to World of Warcraft, right? Like, that's another big thing where they announced like 3 expansions and they brought Chris Metzen back on to be like lead writer or story director or whatever. Like, there's been a lot of like recent changes to Blizzard. It's gonna take a while, right? It's gonna take a while for them to reconstruct and for them to like mend that bridge, right? Like that bridge to the community has been burned and severed quite heavily in all of their games, basically. I want to say in all their games, even with Overwatch, of course, and all the others. It has been severed, and this is like the first couple of steps over the past year. We've seen them kind of like work towards fixing that and rebuilding that, and it's definitely positive things moving forward. Obviously, you want to temper expectations and you want to, not go, not drink all the Kool-Aid, right? Don't go head first in. But for the most part, it feels good. Feels good, man. We'll be getting into some of the other announcements made recently as well, which kind of goes along the lines of all this as well, right? Hearthstone, they had their relatively recent like StarCraft expansion or StarCraft like add-on for a limited time where they were supporting that. We'll get into it later, but Diablo is doing something similar as well. Like, in general, like, there's a lot of cross-pollination. We, of course, at the start of the year had the big announcement that they partnered with was it Nexon? That they were having bidding wars in Korea for a new StarCraft IP game, right? They were having bidding wars there, and then that's happening as well. I think, if I remember, I think it was Nexon that got it. If I'm not mistaken. Not for an RTS, I think most people believe, for like probably a mobile game or something. But like, doing something with the IP is a positive thing, and yeah, positive things, positive. Aye. Regardless of how the patch is looking, when it comes to the patch itself, I think the biggest problem with the patch, going back to what we're properly covering here, I think the biggest problem here is there are no dev notes. I think it's important to have some developer notes just to know what they want, right? Like, we're getting all these changes, and I think we can kind of get an idea of some things, but like, it'd be good to kind of get an idea of like what they're looking for, what kind of game state they want, and where they want to take the game, right? So then we can probably critique and be like, this is not really achieving your goal, or maybe it is, right? Maybe it is. We don't know what they're thinking. We don't know the trajectory of the game that they want to push towards. I think the clearest one is like Ling Bane, right? The change to the Spire, the change to the Baneling. I think that's quite clear that they want to bring back like Ling Bane Muta. I think that's quite clear. But outside of that, and obviously like nerfing NG overcharge, that's obviously clear. That makes sense. When it comes to the change to and reducing vision, but the change to Storm, like the change to the Siege tank, like I think the Storm change specifically, like I would love to know like what their goal is, what they want out of it, and what they want out of the matchup of TVP as well. Like, I feel like TVP is a matchup that is hurting right now. That's in a really rough kind of state, and needs some attention. I feel like it needs some attention, Pappy, and hopefully they get it. Oh. Aye. Just catching up. Just catching up. There was a lot in the chat. It's a hurricane now. True. Kira's celebrating headbutting stasis traps versus Max X. True, unironically true. Yes. Big hero buff in PvP. The Warcraft 3 remake was such a massacre. Yeah, which is why, if you recall, what we were getting at is that it's important that they abandoned it for a while, and they recently had like a big patch. And from my understanding, like the community response to the Warcraft 3 Reforged update was very positive, very positive. But with that, that is going to be us, I guess, wrapping up the current patch 5.0.15. Again, when it comes to the patch itself, we'll see if we get any amendment patches. In general, Protoss is going to be coming out very happy with this patch and ahead, which I don't think was the intent. I don't. Again, we don't know if that was the intention. We don't, did the Blizzard team want that? No, are they going full Reddit and are they like, you know what, we're gonna buff Protoss until they win EWC? it's like, okay, Pappy. Okay. I mean, if that's what you want, then they're going for it. But they're going for it. Maybe. So again, that's the other one thing. The one criticism that I would have is that I would hope that in the future we get those development notes, that we get an idea of what they want out of the game and what they're pushing for and what their goals are and where they want to take things, because that also helps us when it comes to providing feedback and providing solutions, providing other changes and providing alternatives as well. So I think it will just benefit all if we had a little bit more transparency in regards to the patch itself. That's what I would hope for. But moving forward, that leads us into our next big piece of news here that leads into the other side of balance, that is the maps themselves, the Team Liquid map contest. Now, if you remember, this actually went live right after we wrapped up the podcast last week, so we didn't get to talk about it. Now, if you want a more in-depth breakdown of the maps and of the Team Liquid map contest 21, then I do recommend checking out our YouTube channel. We did upload a VOD. Well, we did have a stream where we went over all the maps. That was like the day after these maps went live. For those that are unaware, I was one of the judges. I was one of the judges for Team Liquid Map Contest 21. I was one of five judges. And on that stream, we went through all the maps. I showed all the feedback that we were providing, like the ratings that the judges provided, and my overall thoughts on the finalist maps themselves, on some regrets that I had, on a learning process that I had as well. It was my first time being a judge for Team Liquid Map Contest, and it was definitely a learning process. I think I enjoyed it, and overall I think I did a decent job. I got a lot of feedback. Shout out to all the map makers. Shout out to some of the other judges as well. I definitely got a positive response, and they were all very grateful for the amount of attention that we gave to it, and the amount of detail and the feedback that we provided as well. So I will say that very much so positive, when it comes to the map makers. If it was anything negative, then we didn't get to hear from it. But yeah, if you want to go more into detail, then check out our YouTube. Under the live tab, we do have the TLMC kind of review there available to you. Very in-depth, like 3 to 4 hours. Do check it out.
I will also add a note that I did actually timestamp all the maps in case you're interested in particular ones.
Yeah, there you go. So again, I do highly recommend checking out the kind of judging process, what I was looking for, what I wasn't looking for, what I rated poorly, what I didn't rate poorly, kind of like what I was, again, like my thought process coming into judging macro maps, rush maps, standard maps, and how I would kind of grade and rate said features on these maps as well. So yeah, if you're interested, I again got a lot of positive feedback regarding that, and you can check it out yourselves. Otherwise, we have our top 16. We have our top 16 maps here in the TLMC21, and voting will soon be open. I believe it is still closed. Voting will be open after the Wardy tournament. The Wardy TLMC tournament is going to be next week, and after it wraps up, then players can vote. We have already been hosting tournaments on these maps, so if you haven't seen it, check out this week's Tuna Cup, the Tuna Cup monthly September edition, because we had a full set of fresh TLMC 21 maps. We will do the best that we can to provide and to showcase these maps as often as possible, so you can come in with the most amount of information, most amount of data, to be able to judge and to be able to vote as informed as possible. So again, we're going to be running these maps as often as we can. Up first, we have Throne of Dunes. Throne of Dunes is a more macro-oriented map. This is one of the maps that I actually rated a little bit poorly here. You can turtle up relatively easily on 4 and 5 bases. It is not as egregious as some of the other maps, I will say that. If you want more in-depth breakdown, then check out that judging stream. Check out that VOD. Scrolling down, we have Taito Citadel. We have Taito Citadel. This is one that I think we all rated very high. I think it was like top 3. Actually, hold on. should have done this before. CranKy, Ducklings, TLMC21. I should just quickly open up the judging sheets. Oh, right. Also, if you check out that VOD, actually, I'll link it in the chat. Yeah. I'll link it in the chat so you can check it out yourselves at some point. But in that YouTube video, in the comments, we actually posted the public judge scoring kind of notes, or the judge scoring spreadsheet, so you can see all of that yourselves. But up next we had Tidal Citadel. This is another macro map by Patches. I think Patches got like 3 maps in. The first one was from the music. This was from Patches. Oh, I recall this one. This one we also rated a little bit higher here, just because like you can turtle up and you can set up on 4 bases relatively easily, but there are some rocks you can knock down to open up the 4 bases a little bit more, to be able to harass, to be able to apply aggression, and to be in the face and try to break a defending player and a turtling player. So there's a bit of a give and take available on Tidal Citadel. Up next we had Talisman. Talisman was around in the previous TLMC, so you should be familiar with this map. We casted a lot of games on Talisman. It is a rush map, really unique. It does have a mineral wall leading into the main base, and it does have these high yield bases on the low ground, pushing and expanding towards the opposing player. Basically, all-in central. There's a lot of all-ins. Think like torches, but even more intense. So high yield bases, goal bases, more aggressive expansion patterns, shorter rush distance by ground, and in general does favor aggressive and all-in play. We've seen a lot of games on Talisman already. From my understanding, there were some changes made from this version and the previous version, but again, you can come in informed with that. At least there's a lot of data on Talisman already. Scrolling down, we had Mothership by Killer Smile. Mothership is a 3-player spawn map. I can say that there were multiple 3-player spawn maps that were submitted to the TLMC. This one was the highest rated one. Some of the others had their own issues, but this is honestly not too bad. It is a 3-player spawn map. I would say it is superior to that of Lost Fantasy. The 3-base setup is pretty secure. The 4th base is more exposed. The rush distance by ground is a little bit longer, of course. Is a little bit easier to defend and turtle up, and you can expand towards your opponents. There are other fringe locations as well. You can get ninja bases. Like, it is, I would say, really solid 3-player spawn map, at least more so than some of the others that we've seen. We did already feature this map in Bjorn versus Geralt, where Geralt was able to get full map control, but Bjorn was able to hold his own for quite some time. But Bjorn, he's a little bit more of a turtley player, and he didn't really get to be active on the map. I look forward to seeing more games on Mothership. So far, we've only seen one between Bjorn and Geralt. Up next, we had Magnetic North. This is a very popular map. When we featured our tournaments, we casted like 5-6 games on this map, quite a bit actually. So Magnetic North is also another rush map. It does have some high yield gas bases off to the right hand side that you can try to take early on. We saw a lot of Zerg players take their ninja bases at the high yield gas geyser base. We saw it from Shin, we saw it from Young Yakov. We saw a lot of aggression here on this map, and also some counter aggression as well. We saw players like Hero and other Protoss players go for 8 gates. Nightmare, that's it. Hero, Nightmare, go for a lot of 8-gate aggression to try to shut down the goal base, to try to shut down the proxy, the ninja base, I should say, and to out-aggress the Zerg player with some relative success. Personally, I'm quite fond of how the games turned out here on Magnetic North. Again, I do recommend the VODs, do recommend checking out the VODs, do recommend checking out the games played on Magnetic North. Scrolling down, we had Risen Memory. This is a crazy map. I say crazy. This is by Shadefang Plixian, not a name that I'm familiar with, actually. Magnetic North was by Depressed One. Risen Memory is very open. I was a little bit surprised. I don't think I rated this highly, actually. I think I might have given it a 3. Yeah, 3. The other judges were a lot more fond of this map. This is very open. Like, the 3-base setup is relatively secure, but the 4th and 5th bases are a lot farther away. Very open as well, very exposed. I'll be honest, I can see both Terran and Protoss having a pretty hard time defending on this map and securing 4 bases. Maybe Terran will have an easier time because of the terrain, but yeah, this map is crazy. Like, it's very open, very Zerg friendly is what I will say. Maybe overly so, but testing is required. I have not seen a game on Risen Memory yet. Not yet. Scrolling down, we had Ruby Rock. Ruby Rock, we saw a couple of games on as well. This map, the bases are a little bit more secure compared to Risen Memory, but they're a lot more spread out. The rush distance by ground is also quite short as well. So we saw a lot of aggression on this map, and we saw some difficulty defending. Specifically, the 3-base setup. There's a very wide entrance into the natural, a wide entrance into the 3rd base. We have multiple other narrow ramps coming into the natural, coming into the 3rd as well. There's just a lot of angles of attack on 3 bases, and it looks very difficult to defend on 3 bases as well. We did see some very impressive defense with Storm. Again, we mentioned before that Storm is now a really powerful zoning tool. So even with these more open bases, we did see some successful defenses against Zerg all-ins on this map, with the help of Storm, of course. So yeah, definitely interesting to see, and I'm curious to see if that trend continues, if you're able to defend, or if the map is just too favored towards all-ins, too much so to the point where it's just overly oppressive. We'll see. Made by Volumen. Next, we had Winter Madness. This is a map that I'm not very fond of. Winter Madness is very defensive. Going through the judging process, it does feel like you can get up to 5, 6, and 7 bases a little bit easier. It is crazy. So this is a really turtle-friendly map. The entry points are much more narrow. The way that you expand allow you to defend bases behind you as well. So again, getting up to 5, 6, 7 bases is going to be a little more easier here. Turtling up, expanding freely. There are less ways to punish expansions here as well. Personally, I'm not too fond of it, but it is available here. And again, potentially, maybe my fears are a little bit too much. Maybe my concerns are unfounded, and maybe there are ways to punish, and maybe there are ways to break a turtling player. But based on what I saw, it looks like Turtle City. It's at least from what I'd seen. Scrolling down, we had Celestial Enclave. Fun fact, this was the #1 map picked. I think all the judges rated this map highly, came out on top. This is a macro map. It does have a interesting setup on 4 bases. The 5th base is a lot more exposed. You have a pseudo pocket, so you do have a pocket expansion, but it's a minimalistic pocket expansion with only 1 gas geyser. Your 4-base setup is relatively secure, but the base is a little bit more spread out. And again, the forward 5th base does not defend the 6th expansion. So the bases are a little bit more accessible, which is what we're looking for in these larger macro maps, not making it easy to turtle up on 5 bases. Personally, I look forward to seeing maps and games on this. We did feature Beyond versus Geralt on this map. I want to see more. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, 100%. This is like my ideal macro map, which is defensive on 4 bases, but then 5th forward, the 5th base moving forward is a little more exposed, a little more vulnerable, a little more difficult to defend, and there's more counterplay available as a result. Scrolling down, we had 10,000 feet. This is a rush map. This is a really unique rush map with a quote-unquote pocket 3rd base. There's a mineral wall. Leading into the 3rd, which can be mined out. We did see attempted rushes by Shin rushing into that base and then pulling the boys to mine through the minerals to kill Hero. Mixed results, mixed success there. I do think that Shin could have executed a little bit better, but there's potential for all-ins using that. Again, shorter rushes by ground. But I will say that the bases are a little bit more defendable because of the tumors. There are a lot of massive Zerg tumors on the map that expire over time. As the game progresses, the map opens up more, but early on, it does feel relatively defendable on 3 bases. So it's a nice little balance of things. Honestly, I really do appreciate. I think this was the highest rated rush map by the judges, just because it does open up and it does favor aggression coming into the mid game, and it's not too aggressive in the early game, thanks to the rocks, thanks to the destructible, the giant Zerg tumors, I should say. Up next, we had Missing You by Timmy. I'll be honest, this map has some issues. I will say that shout out to Timmy, by the way. Timmy, he was very much so willing to hear and listen to feedback, and to maybe try to adjust some things. Missing You today is, I would say, a very turtle-friendly map. 5 bases here, very simple to set up on. Your own corner of the map, getting up to 5 bases. There are some really unique features on Missing You today, with gold bases top right and some other expansions bottom left. But I will say that it doesn't really matter if a player can easily turtle up on 5 bases. They can very easily max out and build up. What I will say is that Timmy, he did consider potentially opening up the 5th base a little bit more and maybe adding a high gas expansion in the top right hand corner instead. The reasoning why that would be a beneficial thing is, at least in my opinion, if you're going to have a map that lets you easily turtle up on 5 bases, you do want something to punish that. And there are different ways to do that. One of the ways to do that is with high yield gas bases. What that means is that if you can have like some high yield gas bases in the corner, if one player decides to just forfeit map control and turtle, you can punish them by taking those high yield gas spaces and having a boosted gas income to try to break them, to try to punish them, to try to again have some kind of counterplay against just a turtling player. But that isn't available on this map, and Timmy did say that he was considering maybe adding that to help out with that kind of game state. Right now, instead, there are 2 gold bases. I will say that does favor Protoss and PvT, because Protoss typically do gain map control in Protoss versus Terran. It's easy for them to do so, easy for them to force the Terran player to turtle up. And if the Terran player turtles, then on this map, there are 2 gold bases that does benefit a Zealot-heavy reinforcement wave. So this is a really strong map for PvT for Protoss, just because they can just hammer down mass Zealot much easier here. I will say the gold bases are less effective for Zerg players in Zerg versus Protoss or Zerg versus Terran, because the mass mineral income matters less, as they reinforce with Lings, not Zealots, and they're less effective, less robust. Gas is a little bit more important there to get into the more high-tech units. So yeah, missing you today definitely can be improved. It can be improved, and it might be changed over time. We'll see. Up next, we had Old Republic. Old Republic is a map that does remind me a little bit of Eternal Empire. It does have a unique map setup here, base layout, I should say, with a relatively secure 3 base setup. What I will say about this map is that, unlike some of the other macro maps, where I would say that the standard on these macro maps is that you get a really secure 4 base setup, and then your 5th is more exposed, here the 3 base setup is secure, the 4th is exposed. It does look like it's very difficult to take a 4th base here. Whether it's a low ground 4th or the 4th over on the right hand side, it does look really far out. It does look exposed. It does look difficult to defend. We saw Beyond struggle on this map, struggle to turtle up on 4 bases. Geralt just hammered him down, but more testing is required. In general, though, I do feel like this is a difficult map to get into the mid game on. It's going to be difficult. Scrolling down, we had White Rabbits. This, I think I gave this map. Did I give it a 1? Did I? Similar to Winter Madness, this is done by The Music. White Rabbit does look very turtle friendly. Setting up on 3, 4, 5 bases seems pretty straightforward. Not just that, this map has some really unique features which we don't see anymore, which is there are these massive cliff faces and massive ravines in the center. You can kind of see them if you're looking at the minimap image of it. You can see like the massive black lines. These massive areas where tanks or siege-based units can set up and just dominate the middle of the map. They can dominate the center of that map and just make so much terrain immovable, to the point where you can secure your own half relatively easly. I did get some pushback on this, saying that like maybe I was like thinking too highly of the defensive setup here and of those of that terrain. But I mean, I did get some pro players on to ask them about it as well, and they agreed. They were like, this map is crazy. Like personally, like it's a bit much. I did give some feedback regarding like adding ramps and opening up the center of the map instead. But as it stands, there are lots of abusable siege positions and a lot of ways to just secure the center and to easily get up to 5 bases, at least in my opinion. I should also emphasize that all that I'm saying is my opinion sort of thing, right? Like I should also emphasize that, maybe you want a map where you can easily turtle up on 6 bases, right? Like maybe that's something that you're looking for, and that's something that you will vote for. So that's true. Like there are definitely people that want other things out of the game. They want that sort of like aspect of the game as well. Like it's true. People they're looking for different things. So bear that in mind when you do get into voting. So that is White Rabbits. It is Matrix themed, which is a shame because I'm not too fond of the map itself, but I do like that it's. I appreciate like the aesthetic of the map, like the Matrix theme, the name of the map as well. But yeah, it does at least in my opinion have its issues. Scrolling down, we have Andromeda. Andromeda is also one that it's a very ambitious map, but it has a lot of issues. The map itself is made by Depressed One. I think he's very ambitious. I think in his own comment, he speaks about how, like, he's excited to see how players expand on this map and how they can expand towards the corners of the map. But the rush distance by ground is very short from third base to third base, to the point where all-ins and aggression looks very powerful on this map. On top of that, I will say that certain races, specifically Terran, can have a very easy time getting up to 5 bases here. There's a high ground, high yield base that is very secure, and you can expand forward, then take a safe base behind it, get up to 5 bases, and use that high ground base as a launch pad to push into the third base of your opponent. Like, specifically in TVZ. Like, this map is brutal, and the center of the map has all these choke points, has all these side blockers alongside rocks as well, which mean that you cannot surround an army that's pushing. So it looks really easy to get up to 4 and 5 bases, and it looks really easy to push without being concerned about engagements, about surrounds, about flanks. It definitely has a lot of issues. I did provide some feedback about opening up the map, making it a little bit more open, taking away from some of the rocks, maybe opening up the low ground base, just making it a little bit more open in the center compared to what it is. Because it's got its issues for sure. It does have its issues. Scrolling down, we have Tourmaline. Tourmaline is an interesting map as well. Tourmaline is a little bit more open, does have a very direct attack path from natural to natural. That is a concern that I have. Like, I can see German taxis being really popular on this map. Testing is required for me. Like, I'm still not entirely set in stone, but it does feel like it is going to be favoring aggressive play, just because if you're looking at the map, there's no high ground, right? There's no points of elevation to slow down a push, to slow down an all-in. So if a player commits across the map, again, from natural to natural, it's very direct. It's very direct, and it doesn't feel like there's many ways to try to engage ahead of time. It does look a little bit brutal in that aspect, but we'll see. That's at least my concern coming into Tourmaline, is like the strength of all-ins. Then we had Satellite Years. This is another interesting map, also made by Depressed One. This map's big feature is it actually has a shared third and fourth. There's a third and fourth base right next to each other. So it does mean that you can potentially set up on 4 bases relatively easily here and take a faster fourth base than you're used to seeing. The downside is that the third base is a little more exposed. There's a wide ramp coming into the third on the right and a wide entrance coming from the fourth base as well. I think some feedback was provided to maybe add some rocks to secure the third base a little bit more, at least on the left-hand side, to make it not as abusable. So I can definitely see all-ins and aggression working, breaking the third base, but if you can establish a third, you can take your fourth base relatively easily. The center of the map is a little bit more open, and there is a high yield gas base, so if a player does decide to turtle up, like, there are some ways to punish that, there are some ways to counter that, and there's also this abusable low ground in between the linear natural and third base, which also looks quite abusable as well. So there's a bit of a give and take here, potentially easier 4 base setup, but also potentially more positions to where aggression is favored, where you can try to abuse the defending player in between the natural and third base and towards their fourth and third as well. So yeah, definitely some interesting features, some interesting aspects of Satellite Years. Otherwise, yeah, those are our 60 maps. What I will say as well is I have to double check them because some of the feedback that we provided had already been implemented. I remember that for Mothership, the 3+1 map for Mothership, we did provide a lot of feedback because there were some abusable tank spots. Like, there was a position at the natural where tanks could actually hit the mineral line and hit the gas geyser as well. But when the map went live, when it got pushed live into TLMC21, they fixed it. So I was like, they took that feedback, they fixed it. I will be checking the other maps as well to see if they've also taken on some of the feedback and if they've also kind of adjusted things as well. Because again, we provided a lot of like suggestions as to like how to adjust things, how to potentially fix things as well. So we'll see. We'll see if that was taken on board. But these are our 16 maps. And again, voting is not yet available. Voting, I believe, should be opening up once the Wardy TLMC tournament concludes, which is going to be next week. We've already run tournaments on these maps, so if you want to check them out, check out our channel, check out the VODs over on YouTube. We've already been hosting events, and we will be hosting more events moving forward as well. Just because we feel like it's really important that it's not just Wardy's TLMC tournaments, but that we have like as much data, as many games out there as we can on these maps, so you can come in as informed as possible when it comes to voting, when it comes to picking what you like and what you don't like. So we'll do our best. But yeah, so I do recommend checking it out. Otherwise, again, exciting times. I believe we are scheduled to get a new map pool in November. So we're going to have voting available and the judging process. I say judging, the voting process available throughout October, and then coming into November, we'll have our new map pool. I believe it is still uncertain whether or not we're going to get a full map pool or if we leave some of the old maps. I think there's a high chance that we just leave some of the old maps and instead we just get a couple of maps rotated out. Personally, I would love to see a fully fresh map pool, but it does kind of depend on what the people want. I want to say that last time Waxy left it open to public voting, I think most people did agree that it was just going to be like a bit of a refresh where some maps were left on. I think partly that was also people wanting to know how often we'd get these map rotations, and I think Wax wants to do them more frequently. I think he wants to do it more than just once a year. Like more than once a year, like every couple of seasons would be ideal. So much love to Wax, much love to those working behind the scenes on the Team Liquid map contest. And again, voting will be available soon, and keep an eye out for those tournaments that do host these maps, just so you can see them yourselves and you can see what you like and see what you don't like. And every vote counts. Every vote counts. Meanwhile, that very quickly as well, the Wardy TV TLMC Team Liquid Map Contest number 15 tournament, I believe, has been officially announced and is in 5 days. Is going to be in 5 days' time. We have the group stage into the playoff bracket as well. Looks like qualifiers are going to be taking place, and I don't think they're available yet. All right, they're happening right now. True. The qualifiers are happening as we speak. Which means we can very quickly go through them. Yeah, we can go through them. As you can see here, we have a Classic versus Ryung. We have a Chance. Oh, Chance 2-1. Oh no! I mean, this is on the new patch. My heart goes out to Shin, Bappy. Chance takes down Shin 2-1. That's a big upset, by the way. It's a big upset. Shin is out. Byun takes down Lilix. Amana takes down Geralt. Zaun takes down Ragnar, and Rogue takes down Young Jakob. Right now, looks like we have 4 qualifying matches currently underway, and again, that's being covered over by Wardy on his channel to determine who will make it through into the main event. There are going to be invites as well. We've already heard from Wardy. Typically, like, Protoss and Terran players make it through the qualifier, and he does try to invite as many Zergs as possible to try to get some Zerg representation in the group stage. So I wouldn't be surprised if Shin gets invited, to be honest. Would not be surprised. But yes, that is going to be, again, in 5 days' time. By the time we get the next podcast, we'll be able to go over the group stage at least. So we'll be able to go through that. Up next, we have some big team announcements. This should not be a surprise to you. Elazer, he does say goodbye to Team Liquid. This is a bit of a shame. If you know anything about Elazer, you would know that he did stop competing in StarCraft. I say stop competing. He took a big step away from StarCraft, and he's been streaming a lot of Age of Empires instead. A lot of AoE 4, and a lot of team games. So Elazer, he's been spreading his wings and playing other and competing in other RTSs. He's been spending a lot less time with StarCraft. So to see Team Liquid let Elazer go, it is a big shame. Like, they've been together for a long time, and I want Elazer to be supported, but it also makes sense. Like, if he's not really competing in StarCraft, if he's focusing his attention to Age of Empires, and I don't know how big AoE is. Like, I don't know how much Team Liquid care about having a presence in Age of Empires. If it isn't really a priority, then it makes sense for them to part ways with Elazer. So I hope that Elazer is able to find a team that is willing to support him, especially if he does want to take a bigger role in Age of Empires, right? If he wants to delve further into AoE, if it's something that he enjoys a lot more as well, then I hope he can find a team that is willing to support him in those endeavors. Unfortunately, AoE is not a part of EWC, so Team Liquid, I'm pretty sure they prioritized EWC quite heavily. They do prioritize it, and if AoE isn't a part of it, then they have less care for it, unfortunately. And that also leads into the next announcement for Team Liquid. They've said goodbye to the Muslim, and this, I will say, this is maybe a little bit more surprising. Maybe the Muslim, he's also been focusing a lot on Age of Empires. It's even stated in the title, in the tweet, I should say, how he's like an AoE 4 powerhouse, and he is, like, Demuslim, I believe he's one of the best players in Age of Empires. But again, if Elazer and Demuslim are focusing on AoE, and if Team Liquid don't care about AoE, then that does hurt them, right? Then it does make sense that they would part ways. I would say for Demuslim, I could see a world where he could have stayed on just because he's also a commentator, right? He also casts, he commentates, so he provides value for the team in other ways, but maybe not enough, right? Like maybe they don't really value that as much, especially because the reality is when it comes to StarCraft, the casting scene is very saturated, very saturated. And if you remember, Demuslim, he was a part of Esports World Cup. He was a part of it. He was on the B stream. He was one of the casters on the B stream. He was not on the mainstream. So because of that, maybe Team Liquid, they're seeing a little bit less value in that, and they decide not to renegotiate and not to renegotiate those contracts. So it is a bit of a shame. I do hope that both Elazer and Demuslim are able to find some nice teams, some nice homes, places that they can call home, and continue, of course, their professional careers in esports, in casting, commentating, and content creation. So best of luck to Demuslim, best of luck to Elazer moving forward, as they are no longer a part of Team Liquid. That leads us into the OSC Masters Cup 2025. Again, the OSC Masters Cup used to be a regular event, but has turned into, I would say nowadays, a yearly event. There was only one Masters Cup in 2024, there was only one Masters Cup in 2023, only one in 2021, and only two in 2022. So this has become an annual tournament, and OSC are partnering with Dave Testa. So Dave is going to be the main caster of this event. He does have priority, does have dibs on the event, and it's a big tournament as well. You have a massive group stage, massive playoff stage, and qualifiers are going to be taking place. So this is a kind of a big initiative here for Dave and OSC. So if you want to tune into this, then check out Dave Testa's channel. The qualifiers are around the corner. Once we get results, we'll be discussing them. But for the most part, again, if you're out there, want to compete, then check out those qualifiers. It is a big tournament. Best of luck. Best of luck to all the players, and best of luck to Dave Testa as well. So it's going to be helping partnering and hosting another big tournament. That leads us into the SC for All invites. The SC for All is a big event happening in Philadelphia. Basically, it is Cheesedelphia, but partnering with SC Historian. And we have some more names announced competing and being invited for the main tournament. We have Raz, a player that I'm unfamiliar with, but Raz, apparently he is a local StarCraft Brood War player, a competitor. So he's going to be stepping in. He's the third Brood War invite. So congratulations. Shout out to Raz, again, a player from the US. Is going to be competing in the Brood War version in the Brood War tournament in SC for All. And for SC2, we do have Mixu. Mixu is going to be traveling to the Americas and competing in the Philadelphia tournament as well. So congratulations to, or shout out to Mixu and Raz for taking part, for heading over, for taking part as well. That leads us into StarCraft Evolution, into SC Evo. This is a little bit of an awkward moment. We were going to be discussing this last week, but we had no time because there was just so much more going on. But StarCraft Evolution, they haven't pushed through a patch yet, but they're going to soon, and they have announced, they did announce a PTR. They announced their own PTR, their own upcoming changes, and it's still been in the testing phase, but they recently announced that they're going to be pushing this live. Now, the reasoning for this, and it is a bit of a shame, they basically were very candid. They were like, we're just going to push this live, and then we're going to have to fix everything anyway. The reasoning for this is because the base game just got patched, right? SC2 just got patched, which means they have to recalibrate, they have to readjust, and they have to now start to balance and look at all the matchups now that the base game has changed with the Storm, with the Ghost, with the Microbial Shroud, with all these changes that are happening in StarCraft 2. That is going to mean that balancing for StarCraft Evolution is going to be negatively impacted. It means that all these changes that they were working on, suddenly they don't really mean as much because the game is changing. So what they were balancing for and what they were working on, it's no longer applicable, no longer viable, it's no longer as impactful. So it is a bit of a shame. It means that the work that they were putting into this patch, it kind of has to be like wiped clean, and they have to start again. And they've admitted so as well. They've already stated that. They're like, okay, we just gotta take some time to observe, to see how all these matchups have changed, how they evolve, how they settle, and then start working on balancing the game once again. So it's not an easy time for those in the SC Evo team. Best of luck, man. Yo, meanwhile, a big shout out for Jimmy in the chat. Baby, Jimmy. Ay, ay, ay. We just finished talking about the patch, baby. I do recommend the VOD. Do check out the VOD. Do check out our thoughts on the patch, on the new maps as well. But we're, of course, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. We're going through all things StarCraft. We're just wrapping up and we're just getting into the SC Evo PTR patch changes. The first thing is, of course, they do have a new model for the Cybercore. Do love to see it. Very aesthetic. Nice to see. So a new model is going to be made, going to be implemented. And meanwhile, we do have some Terran changes to the Marine. So Marine, when it comes, we've seen so many changes to Marine, Firebat, Medic. We're going to see it once again. Despite the nerfs, the changes, the buffs, despite what they've done to Terran in SC Evo, Biowin early sim timings are still very strong, and it looks like they want to try to adjust that once again, or maybe recalibrate. We'll see. Marine, decreased build time. Ooh, so build time has been decreased here. Yeah, from 17.1 to 16.1 instead. So slightly decreased build time, decrease the attack period as well. So that means that they do attack more regularly, a little bit more, from 0.69 to 0.67. We have decreased Stimpack attack speed bonus. Whoa, wait, whoa, hold on. Decreased Stimpack attack speed bonus from 100% to 75. That is huge. That is a big nerf to Stim. I did mention that they've been having a really hard time balancing and trying to adjust and trying to figure out these stim timings in StarCraft Evolution, but this is a really, really big change. Okay, so yeah, this will impact not just the stim timings, but stim in general here, Biowin in general in StarCraft Evolution. Increase attack period after stim as well. So now, again, they're not attacking as regularly, as frequently, and of course it affected the attack speed as well. So that is a big nerf here to stim. Decreased U238 shells research time as well. So that is a buff, or that does mean that it researches slightly faster, I should say. So faster research time, but again, a big blow to stim. Firebat, a decreased build time from 17.1 to 16.1. So once again, slightly faster build time, slightly faster you can get out these Firebats, I should say. And decreased HP from 55 to 50, so Firebats are going to be a little bit more vulnerable, and a decreased build time for Medic. So they did the same build time decrease for the Medic, the Marine, and the Firebat, but they did nerf the Firebat's health, and also they did a big blow to Stim as well. Let's hear from them. Okay, recently the data team became aware that the actual attack speed bonus of Stimpack for the Marine and Brood War is approximately 72%, 72.2, not 100%. Core has already been updated to reflect this, but the multiplayer balance team initially did not believe it would be necessary to implement, or even possible to balance. However, a number of problems such as the Marine supply density as part of a maxed out army, the inviability of SC2 Bio against Brood War Bio in the mirror matchup, and the sheer ease of use of Marines overall, particularly at low levels of play, have created issues with skill expression and the learning curve of the race that we think would be addressed. With both the SCL Season 2 Championship and Chijik Merlo King Cup number 2 behind us, the 1.17 PTR serves as a perfect testing ground for changes we have devised. It's, again, as I mentioned, it's a little bit of a shame that they worked on this, but it's not as impactful just because of the patch. So they're going to have to go back to the drawing board, but regardless, the change to the Baneling, for example, and the change to Zuri, the change to Protoss as well, I mean, it is going to impact all these matchups quite heavily. Especially Storm as well. Jesus, I wasn't even thinking of that, how it impacts StarCraft Evolution. So again, they're trying to take away from some of the power of Brood War Bio. Scrolling down, we have the change to the Ghost. Oh, we have more changes. Jesus. Okay, so the Ghost decreased lockdown duration from 27 to 23.6. I mean, lockdown is my favorite part of Brood War Bio, not gonna lie, and Brood War Terran. So they are taking away some of the power of lockdown, which makes sense. Lockdown is a very powerful tool in StarCraft Evolution, is maybe the most powerful tool, and they are going to be lessening that a little bit here as well. This is one of a number of changes this patch that make certain excessively long, slow stun and environmental altering spells shorter down to about 50% of their core durations. This proposition helps these effects fit better into StarCraft 2's fast-paced combat, while keeping them distinctly longer than SC2's counterpart, avoiding being an outright nerf in most practical situations. So this is a really bold move. We haven't gotten into the rest of the changes yet, but basically we're getting the idea that they're probably going to be nerfing the Ghost, the Queen and Snare as well, and maybe even Arbiter stasis traps, right? The stasis fields. I would imagine that those are the three that are going to be targeted. That is pretty huge. I would say that those are some of the strongest spells out there just because of their duration, 100%. But it looks like maybe the balance team for StarCraft Evolution has concluded that maybe it's too much. Like maybe the strength of these spells and how long they are, maybe it's too much, and we should be taking away from that. And it looks like that's kind of the decision that they've arrived at. Wraith increased burst Elazer attack range from 4 to 5. Okay, so increased range. Previously, we increased the attack ground damage of the Wraith in exchange for decreasing its range. The new damage output allowed the Wraith to be more useful in picking off workers and key targets, such as spellcasters and Nidus Worms. However, the reduced range ended up taking away some opportunities to get value out of the Wraith with good micro. In case of the Wraith, we still think the current balance of the game allows for the Wraith to stretch its legs a bit more in this department, so we are simply buffing the range of burst lasers outright. Interesting change. Yo, how often do we mess with the BC? Every patch. Bio is adjusted, every patch of the BC is adjusted. Let's go. Where are we going this time? Decrease build cost from 375 and 275 to 350, 250 as well. So cheaper minerals and cheaper gas wise by 25 each. Decrease HP from 550 to 500. Decrease attack damage versus mechanical. Oh, from 36. Sorry, it's they decrease the laser battery attack damage from 36 plus 8 versus mechanical to just straight up 34. So there's no mechanical bonus, which is a flat 34 instead. That's a pretty big decrease actually. Decrease ATS laser battery attack damage increase per upgrade from +4 to +3. Decrease ATA laser battery attack damage 36 plus 8 to 34. And likewise the upgrade change as well. Okay, let's hear their rationale. Previous reworks of the battlecruiser tried to compensate for its high cost by granting it monstrous stats. However, based on how similar reworks to the Scout and Valkyrie have turned out, we have seen how that overbuffed units locked behind prohibitive infrastructure costs have inconsistent performances, and also feel nothing like how they are in Brood War. Instead, this rework brings the battlecruiser closer to its original stats while making it more affordable. Okay. The new battlecruiser is now much more accessible as a linebacker against SC2 Terran and an early game harassment unit and late game ultra counter against SC2 Zerg. Moreover, both the movement speed buff to the battlecruiser in patch 1.16.5 and its reduced power for the same supply should incentivize more active play with them and discourage turtling. Interesting. We'll see. As they did mention, like previously, the reason why the BC had monstrous stats was because of how immobile it is compared to the SC2 BC. Just because there's no tactical jump, right? There's no jump ability. There's no way to traverse across the map. So that's how they compensated. Looks like they're taking away from that. Looks like they're saying that maybe they pushed too far in that direction. We'll see if that is the case. We'll see if they did push too far or if they didn't. We'll see if this now becomes less viable. I know there was some Terran players in StarCraft Evolution that were actually trying to rush BC and skip tech and try to get there as quickly as possible. Now with it being lessened, this will be impacting that to the point where that's no longer going to be as viable. So that will be taking away from trying to rush into BC. That might be one of the underlying reasons as to why they did do so. Next, we have Zerg changes. Increase attack range from 4 to 4.5 for the Muta. Okay. In a recent patch, we reduced the damage dealt by the Muta in subsequent bounces. Yes, they did try to address ZVZ Muta play quite a bit. And they're pointing out that, hey, the reduced damage did work for what they were trying to accomplish in ZVZ. But it looks like it maybe had a negative impacts in other matchups. So they're trying to give that control and that micro a little bit back to the Muta. Scrolling down, the Devour increased acid spore behavior expiration cooldown 15 to 27.1. Acid spores no longer affects the rate at which carriers launch interceptors. Oh, okay. This is one of the number of changes this patch that makes certain excessively long, slow stun and environmental altering effects shorter. This is a copy paste. This proportion helps these effects fit better into SC2's fast-paced combat pacing. Okay, this is just a copy paste. In the case of Acid Spores, it was found that the core value for the duration of Acid Spores was much shorter than the actual value in Brood War, so this corresponding change in multi is a buff rather than a nerf. Okay. Queen, we spoke about Ensnare earlier. Ensnare no longer slows the attack speed of units with turret weapons. Okay. This includes the Siege Tank, Goliath, Hellion, Hellbat, Cyclone, Liberator, Battlecruiser, Immortal Colossus. Okay. Movement speed remains slowed as usual. Ensnare no longer affects the rate at which carriers launch interceptors. Decrease instead duration, from 21 to 14. Okay, so once again, like this is what we're expecting. We're expecting this to be affecting Ensnare, Lockdown, and Stasis fields. Let's go down to Defiler. Decreased Dark Swarm effect duration from 32 to 20 seconds. Okay, it's big nerfs. They're also looking at Dark Storm as well. Oh, Infestor. Units produced after building a Brood War or StarCraft II Command Center, Hatchery, or Nexus using an enemy worker after the effects of Neuroparasite now consume supply. Brood War and StarCraft II Terran units now consume a shared food pool up to a max of 200, and same with Zerg and same with Protoss. Okay, interesting. I think I had assumed that this was the case, but looks like they're now confirming that. Protoss changes. Units possessed by same thing with the Dark Archon. Scout change. Decrease dual photon blasters attack damage from 4x4 to 7x2 instead. Okay. Increased attack damage bonus +1 versus light. It looks like this is also trying to address like the potential scout versus muta play potentially. So it does a little bit more bonus damage to light units. Increased damage per upgrade. Just in general, more range, more attacks, more damage. Previously, we increased the scout's anti-ground damage while reducing its range. Our intent was to give the units an additional niche against Banelings or Ravager busts, and to encourage harassment by enabling 2 scouts to one-shot a drone. In practice, this has not panned out well, as Baneling and Ravager busts have been less common lately. Moreover, both the decreased range of dual photon blasters and the tight timing window needed to bypass the drone's health regeneration make this drone harassment impractical. Players are also reluctant to invest into multiple scouts. When they do, it is usually through all-in mass scout aggression. The scout's high damage discourages opponents from trying to approach scouts with a clear advantage, but their low range likewise prevents it from being an effective skirmisher. This discourages interaction, resulting in prolonged stalemates, which are eventually broken by a single decisive engagement. To address this, we are reworking the scout once again. It's been reworked quite a bit. This version draws on the lessons learned from the 1.15 and 1.16 iterations of the scout, combining the versatility and micro potential of the scout with most of the raw damage output of the 1.16 scouts. Okay. Again, just I guess to point out, the scout is a really niche unit. It has been a really niche unit. They're trying to fix that. They're trying to make it more viable. They've been trying to push like Stargate openers and Stargate play a lot more. This is one of the issues of Protoss in StarCraft Evolution, is that it doesn't feel like they have many options when it comes to their openers and when it comes to their builds. So this is another way to try to push for something like Stargate play. Well, I should say that, it's one of the reasons why they're trying to work and they're trying to emphasize and quote-unquote fix the scouts, is because if they can, then hey, they can incentivize Stargate openers and they can incentivize another way of playing the Brood War Protoss race instead of just Reaver drop every game. All the Reaver drops. Carrier. Interceptors now launch projectiles instead of firing lasers. Interesting. To better emulate carrier behavior in Brood War, interceptors now fire projectiles rather than hit-scan lasers. These can be dodged. They can also overkill if there are many fired at the same target. Interesting. Arbiter decreased stasis field. Yep, this is what we assumed. 32.9 to 23.6. Okay. So interesting changes. Once again, it is a little bit of a shame that they were working on this PTR at the same time as the SC2 PTR, so that is going to negatively impact StarCraft Evolution, and they're going to have to rework and rebalance everything once again for what is happening in StarCraft 2. Not an easy task. Best of luck. Best of luck to the StarCraft Evolution Balance team. Again, interesting changes that they are with their approaches to a lot of the spells and with how they're trying to approach Bioterran and the BC and the Scout as well. A lot of reworks and again, definitely a lot of ambitious changes. We'll see if they can kind of achieve what they want in regards to some of these units, because they've just been reworked so often, like the Scouts, like the BC, like the Bio setup as well. Best of luck. Best of luck. Especially moving into the new patch. And lastly here, when it comes to our news of the week, we have the StarCraft cosmetics in Diablo 4. Let's go. We spoke earlier how we have been seeing more kind of development and more work on just like this cross-pollination of games again. We saw this previously with Hearthstone, right? Hearthstone, they recently, I think it was at the start of the year, they had the SC2 like expansion add-on where they had like a limited time like SC2 crossover into Hearthstone, and now we're seeing it here. Also, I believe limited time as well, where they have the SC2 crossover into Diablo 4. It's an interesting one. I don't know if you saw the trailer, but they put a lot of work into like a lot of the Zerg units. There's like a Kerrigan skin, there's like a Zergling mount, there's like a Hydra pet, there's like an infested Terran skin, there's the Zagara skin. There's a lot of like Zerg. It looks really cool. And then for Protoss, there's like a Dark Templar skin, and there's a High Templar skin, and then for Terran, there's just like the Barbarian Marine, and that's it. It's like, what? Like I feel like that there's a lot more potential, like with something mech based, with like a Vulture mount, right? True, like a Vulture or a Hellion mount, with like a Firebat skin, or like a Hellbat skin, I should say. Something Thor or mech related. For whatever reason, maybe because aesthetically it's easy and it looks cool, but it feels like they put a lot of attention on like Zerg related skins, and it does look cool, but very much so less with Protoss and even less with Terran. Like again, you've got the one Marine Barbarian skin, that's it. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird that they made that approach. Again, some of it looks really cool. It's a really cool like cosmetic crossover, so you can get some skins in Diablo 4. It's kind of weird that again they gave a little more attention to one thing and less so on the others. Like I'm just a little bit sure. Where's the Vulture mount, Pappy? Where's the Vulture mount? Smoach. Or like the little Goliath pet. True. Like, or no, sorry, not even Goliath. Like a little mini Thor, right? Like the Odin. You can have like a little mini Odin, like walking and stumbling around. I feel like those are easy. Like I say easy. Like they're like no brainers as to like what you would add to the game as a skin. So, yeah, kind of weird. Kind of weird that that one race gets more representation than the other when it comes to this. But regardless, it is a good thing. It is a good thing that there is this crossover and this cross-pollination. Once again, kind of going into the lines of what we were saying earlier, how it does feel like Microsoft, they're now finally, now that they've kind of like cemented themselves that much more in Activision Blizzard, now they're taking the reins and pushing for more work being done when it comes to Warcraft 3, when it comes to Heroes of the Storm, StarCraft, and trying to have that cross-pollination and try to, yeah, work on these in some way, shape, or form. I mean, all good things. All good things, man. All good things. I see in the chat. Hope to see more SC2 crossover stuff. Like, what if Diva was an SC2 player, lore-wise too? True. Now that's crazy. But why would they do that? Why would they do that, Einstein? That doesn't make any sense. Oh no, not like this. Este Einstein. Too soon, papi. Too soon. But with that is the final news of the week. We're going to be going on a short break. And when we come back, we'll be going over the tournament results. There's a lot of tournament results here, a lot of PTR tournaments, a lot of TLMC tournaments, and of course, a lot of now new fresh game tournaments as well, to catch up on all these results and to get an idea of how the meta's been shaping, what's been happening, and how these games have been turning out. We'll see you soon. We'll see you soon after the break.